Well, spring football's gotten underway for Oregon, and there are two major questions on the offensive line. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. So, spring football is here. We don't have fully padded practices yet, but we've got guys taking the field. We've got tidbits to talk about, things to discuss. And a couple of you know who you are out there. One of them is a SCO, a lot of O's. I think there was a YX in there somewhere. But anyway, wanted position group breakdowns. And I think the biggest question right now for Oregon offensively is the offensive line. Everything else, I can say with a pretty high level of confidence, where guys are going to fall in the depth chart. But for the offensive line, I think there are two major questions here. The first one I have is left tackle, because TJ Bass for the last several years has been really, really good. And left tackle or center, I would say left tackle probably is the most important position, maybe center on the offensive line. But that's the other question that I have that I'll get to later. So left tackle to me is the biggest question. And Josh Conerly, the 2022 five-star who played in the jumbo package last year but didn't have a lot of snaps outside of that. Like, he was almost exclusively a run blocker, and then for one game against Colorado, a pass catcher as well. That's kind of all he did, but the potential there is immense. He's got a tackle build. He's clearly ready to play right away because he, jumped in front of guys who had been on the roster already for a year or two to be a part of that jumbo package a year ago, and he did well. And he is the logical choice for left tackle. But at this point in time, where we stand in spring football, I don't get the sense that he's been locked into that position. Now, after the first day of spring practice, Dan Lanning was asked generally, hey, did anybody stand out? And Josh Conerly was who came to mind for Dan Lanning, and it was not prompted. He was not asked specifically about the offensive line. He said, yeah, who stood out on day one? He said it was a great day one, a lot of energy. But, every day one is great because everyone's anxious to get back into it. We want to have, more quality days following day one. But Conerly stood out to him. He said with his work ethic, he goes hard at everything. I mean, he does everything from, drills to stretching at 100% all the time, and he's really happy with him on that sense. And that's an encouraging sign because for a guy who is that highly touted of a prospect, I want to see that sort of mindset from him, right? Where he's thinking, I have to show every single opportunity I get to this coaching staff that I'm ready to be the starting left tackle. And I certainly want him to be because I think his potential is the greatest. But I did see, now I don't know what group it was with or anything like that, but I did see a picture of practice where I believe Bo Nix was taking snaps, and you had JPJ at center, who I'm going to get to on today's show. We've also got some basketball talk coming later because a couple of thoughts there after the NIT win against UCF. I almost said UFC. Anyway, I saw a picture of Stephen Jones playing left tackle. Now, it's day one when I saw that. They also brought in a Johnny Cornelius, who's a highly sought-after tackle, and George Silva, who was a top 10 junior college prospect and a four-star at that via 24/7 Sports when he put his name into the transfer portal. So that's another reason why I don't feel like right now Conerly's locked into that left tackle position. Maybe at least one of those guys is going to have to play right tackle, right, to fill the void left by Big Sala. And there are just some big shoes to fill in that offensive line. Big Sala, Alex Forsyth, TJ Bass, Ryan Walk. Those guys have been staples up front. And this unit has talent and potential, but I do question what the chemistry will look like. And I do question who's going to start where. because I think Connerly is a leading candidate to be the starting left tackle. But if you told me right now that a Johnny Cornelius was one tackle and George Silva was the other, I cannot rule that out as a possibility. So I think that's going to be an interesting battle to follow, is who ends up being the left tackle, who ends up being the right. I can't really see that happening where Connerly isn't good enough to beat out one of them, but you never know. They brought those guys in for a reason. Maybe they were depth pieces. I think Cornelius less so compared to Silva, but not as if Silva doesn't have some talent and size as well. So I think left tackle is an interesting thing to follow as spring practice moves on. Now at center, Jackson Powers Johnson appears like he is the most logical option, which I'm kind of excited about and kind of bummed about, but then kind of not bummed about. I'm kind of excited about it because he's had a close relationship with Alex Forsyth, and it kind of seems like he was the number 3 center a year ago, right? It was Forsyth, Ryan Walk, and then JPJ. And that to me is encouraging that he was, so close with him, because that means they probably talked a lot about, schematics and being a center and what that means. And it kind of seems like Forsyth has, it kind of seemed from the outside that he took him under his wing and, prepared him as best he could to be the next center for Oregon. He's been taking some snaps there from what I've been able to deduce, again, from practice photos, but it just makes the most sense because I really don't know who it could be. But the reason I'm kind of bummed about JPJ being center is because he graded at a high level as a guard last year. Now they have a number of guards. I think that's the position where they're actually deepest on the offensive line going into next season, but they've got a lot of really good guards, but JPJ was consistently, according to PFF, a really, really good one. So I'm bummed to lose him there. But if he maintains, most of that production, because it's harder to play center, right? You're thinking about more. You're not firing off the ball the same way compared to when you're playing guard. There are differences, but he seems like the guy who's the most logical choice to make that jump. And I think he certainly can. And the question will just be, how ready is he? Not just to, we all know that executing snaps at the center position is not a given when you're in the shotgun. Lest we go back to Stanford 2018 or the dreaded Alamo Bowl, right? That's part of the equation here. Got to be able to snap the ball accurately. But more importantly, and the bigger question mark, I think, at the center position is, what is his adjustment going to be like? How much of a learning curve is there after playing a little bit last year, but not a lot at that position, and after having learned from a great center, all Pac-12 guy in Alex Forsyth? What is the learning curve going to be? Because learning to do it and actually doing it, two very different things. And there's another question that I have about the center position that I will answer after I tell you about Built Bars, of course, because the Built March Madness bracket is here. And we know you have a favorite bar or puff. I've got one. It's the Mint Brownie bar. Just a little bit better than the Mint Brownie puff, in my personal opinion. I am a huge fan. And you can go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. When you do so, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built, and one will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March. That goes till the 31st, of course. So hop in and support your pick. The other question that I have at the center position for Oregon is who's going to back up JPJ? And right now, I've got no clue. Absolutely none. I don't think Junior Angelau, who's an interior offensive lineman, sorry, people watching on YouTube, I got something in my eye. I think I got it out. I hope, I pray. Anyway, he, as I understand it, was a guy who played guard and a little bit of tackle, but is projecting as a guard for Oregon on the offensive line. I don't know who the backup center is. And if you're saying, well, Spencer is the backup, why are you so worried about it? Every position at the offensive line, you've got to be too deep. If that involves one guy being versatile and able to back up another player at multiple positions, fine. But on the offensive line, you've got to be too deep at every position. And frankly, I think that's true for just about every position on both sides of the ball. Because you cannot afford, especially with how competitive the Pac-12 is looking in 2023, to have an injury be a complete and total derailment for a position group or a side of the ball, right? Now quarterback is the exception because, there are very few teams that can survive an injury to their quarterback if he's not able to play. But at every other position, literally all of them, O-line, D-line, linebackers, secondary, receivers, tight ends, you have to be able to survive some attrition because you never know when it's going to show up. And last year, Alex Forsythe, by the way, missed a couple of games. He's a sixth-year player. It's not like his body was still adjusting to the Power 5 level, but Ryan Walk was able to slide in, and he did a very good job. I didn't notice a significant drop-off there, right? Marcus Harper saw more time. That also led to JPJ playing a lot at guard. They were all really good. And for every game, I couldn't even tell you which games Alex Forsythe missed. I think I honestly do not remember, right? And that's a good thing, because if I don't remember the games he missed, that means when someone else had to slide in and they had to do some reshuffling, there wasn't a drop-off, which is what we're looking for here. So you don't just need 5 good offensive linemen. You probably need somewhere in the 8 to 10 range with some versatility. But last year we saw a bunch, I think about 8 offensive linemen play regularly, key snaps, important stretches of the game, right? You had Forsythe at center, you had Ryan Walk as a guard, you had JPJ as a guard, you had Stephen Jones as a guard, you had Marcus Harper as a guard, you had TJ Bass as a tackle, you had Big Sala as a tackle. That's 7. So we're looking at least 7, I think maybe closer to 8 offensive linemen who you need to be able to insert and not have there be some massive drop-off in production and quality of play. So that's why we're going just beyond the starting 5 here. And every offensive lineman that Oregon has on the roster, by the way, goes as follows. And there are a couple of guys on here you probably haven't heard of, and we shouldn't expect them to play because maybe they're not guys who were ever really going to be starters, or they're true freshmen who, it's hard to make that adjustment as a true freshman. Though I'm pretty sure JPJ played a solid amount as a true freshman in 2021. But the offensive linemen are Davey Uli, who's definitely a nice depth piece, has played more snaps than you might think at guard. He was a 4-star coming out of state of Washington, I believe, in 2022. I think he's a sophomore this year. Junior Angelau, the Texas transfer, he's wearing number 54. Marcus Harper, who we know is more than serviceable as a guard. JPJ, Cannon Rossi, Holden Whipple, Ty Delgado, a Johnny Cornelius, the Rhode Island transfer, Cole Young, Bailey Jaramillo, that's Dawson's younger brother, who I believe was a walk-on, and Dawson has since transferred elsewhere, Charlie Pickard, George Silva, JUCO guy, Iapani Lalaulu, true freshman, Kawika Rogers, 3-star in the 2022 cycle, I believe, Stephen Jones, 6th year of college football, which is crazy, but hey, happy to have him. Feope Lalaulu, older brother of Iapani, Josh Connerly, Michael Wooten, Janoris Wilson. So those are all the bodies that Oregon has to work with on the offensive line. And I'll wrap up this O-line discussion with my prediction here for who is going to be a starter at each position and who the most notable backups will be. I think Connerly will get it done at left tackle. I think you'll ultimately have Stephen Jones at left guard. I think you'll have Jackson Powers Johnson at center, Junior Angelau, the Texas transfer, at right guard, and I think a Johnny Cornelius, who is more highly sought after than George Silva. I think his potential is pretty immense coming from Rhode Island. I think that's your right tackle. I could very easily see either of those guards or tackles playing on the other side. They could say, I could very easily see Alik Terry thinking and Dan Lanning saying, a Johnny Cornelius is more experienced, we want him at left tackle. Josh Connerly a little bit less so, we want him at right tackle. Because left tackle is Bo Nix's blind side, so that's the most important offensive line position when you're talking about pass protection. I think the guys who rotate consistently into the lineup are George Silva, Marcus Harper, and I think you could see Davey Uli. I think that's more of a, one or two guys gets hurt in that situation, but, a guy gets dinged up or he's got to miss a week. I mean, Stephen Jones missed time last year, and Marcus Harper did a really nice job. A really, really nice job filling in for him. And he played primarily left guard. So, if you're a Uli who also had snaps, I believe, at left guard last year, maybe one of those guys is the direct backup to Junior Angelout, right? If this is what it does end up being. But that's my prediction for the offensive line. Curious what you guys think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below on YouTube or send me a message or a question about anything. Twitter, Smalls_55 or at Locked On Ducks. DMs and mentions wide open as always. But again, offensive line prediction. I think you've got Connerly left tackle, Stephen Jones at left guard, Jackson Powers Johnson at center, Junior Angelout at right guard, Johnny Cornelius at right tackle. I think come September 2nd or the season started tomorrow, that'd be your starting offensive line with George Silva, Marcus Harper, and Davey Uli as the immediate backups there. I really don't know who the backup center is, but I'm most curious to find out because each of the last 2 years, actually, we've had to call upon a backup center. Like it's just something you have to be able to account for. And when you don't have a backup center properly prepared, you get the 2015 Alamo Bowl, and nobody wants to do that again. So let's switch over to the hardwood here. And there are some interesting questions being raised by a couple Oregon fans that I'm going to hold judgment on until the season comes to a close, whenever that is. I hope they go all the way through the NIT and win. I really do. Oregon on Sunday beat UCF 68-54. And they played well. They led at the half. They built on that lead. They held the opponent under 60 points. It was a Dana Altman special, right? Not scoring 80 to 85 a game. Nope. Defensively led team. Offensively, do enough. I hope that what we are seeing right now from Oregon basketball is not a glimpse, but, well, maybe a glimpse. Because, the two teams they've beaten in the NIT so far, UC Irvine and UCF, respectable mid-majors, tournament caliber programs, but not exactly UCLA and Arizona, right? Still, the way they're playing, and by the way, what was their biggest Achilles heel on their resume from this year? The stupid losses to mid-major teams, right? To UC Irvine, same team, and to Utah Valley, and then losing to teams like Washington, Washington State, and Stanford when they weren't playing well. But even so, losing those games, that's what kept Oregon from the tournament this year. So I hope what we are seeing is a glimpse into the future. Because this is the sort of team that I expected to see coming into this year, and that we did see glimpses of in individual performances. I do not expect you as a college basketball team. The season is too long. Travel is demanding. I've been doing a lot of travel this week. I tell you what, before I came on to record this show, I was taking a nap in the shower because I was exhausted from all the travel and the time zone change and everything. Right, that. It can wear on you. It absolutely can. They're not going to the East Coast, super often. Well, they are in non-conference play, I suppose. They've been all over the place and such. But anyway, I don't expect you to play well for all, 34, 35, whatever regular season games. But I expect you to be able to look like this consistently when you have the talent that Oregon has. And this is what they're showing us right now. And this is why I'm glad they decided to play in the NIT. Because you get to see, number one, as a coaching staff, who really wants it, right? A lot of people look at it and say it's a meaningless tournament, it's a disappointment, we didn't want this. Who's going to look at these games and say, this is an opportunity against quality opponents to show my stuff, and we'll get another one on Tuesday against Wisconsin. I would love to beat Wisconsin again because, frankly, it's a time-honored tradition at this point, except for one NCAA tournament game. But we've actually split with them in the NCAA tournament. So, we got that going for us. So, would love to beat Wisconsin again. But you get a chance to see who wants to play hard, who wants to show the coaching staff, yeah, I'm here, I'm in, I'm committed for next year. And there's another clear reason I'm glad they played in the NIT. It doesn't have anything to do with FanDuel, but what I'm talking about does, which is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The tournament's heating up, right? We're through the first weekend. Oh, what a grand and glorious weekend. Fairleigh Dickinson, RIP, but still, just it's the greatest thing in the world. I want Oregon to get back there, but you can feel like you're part of the action when you bet with FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. The other reason I'm glad Oregon is playing in the NIT, rather than declining the invitation as North Carolina did, is because much like bowl games in college football, they are not the games you want to win, but they're still games. They're fun to watch, and you give guys a chance to show the coaching staff against a good opponent what you're capable of and what you've got. And after the UC Irvine game, one of the takeaways I had was, man, saw a lot of good things from Nate Biddle tonight. I really see the potential there. And look, I want N'Faly Dante to come back, but I'm also not sitting here praying, pleading, and hoping desperately that he comes back, because I see what Oregon has at the center position outside of Dante and think we could be okay there. I'd rather have Biddle and Dante. I love being able to rotate 7-footers in there, right? I hope at least 2 of Khalil Ware, Nate Biddle, and N'Faly Dante come back. And Nate Biddle in that game against UCF, I believe at a career high, he had 21 points, 13 rebounds. He only hit 1 3. And he just looks like his confidence is growing more and more every time he takes the court. Remember, this is a guy who last year hardly played at all. Was the sort of guy we were looking at going, 5-star prospect? That guy? Maybe he got overvalued because he was playing high school basketball in the state of Oregon. But then you saw earlier this year, little improvement, but I don't see it. But then at the end of the year, you started to see it more, right? Dante gets hurt. Biddle has to come in. Dante's not playing again in the NIT, and boom, he has a career day. And he's been doing that kind of regularly for the last couple of weeks. And you're starting to see that potential really, really start to grow. And he's coming back next year. He already announced that. So's Jermaine Couisnard. I don't know if we've heard officially from Keyshawn Bartholomew, but he'd have to transfer again. I think he's coming back as well. He played well again on Sunday against UCF. Nate Biddle's confidence has to be sky high. And if Oregon goes through, gets all the way to the NIT championship, and Biddle's at the center of what they're doing, it's going to be hard to look at what he did if he continues at this pace and say, I'm not so sure he shouldn't be a focal point or one of them next year, right? Maybe at that point, you really leave it up to N'Faly Dante and say, do whatever you want. We're good either way because Nate Biddle is there. So I love seeing that from guys like Nate Biddle. It's also been fun with the injuries to Will Richardson and Jermaine Couisnard to watch the walk-ons get some reps, and Gabe Reichel, who had to play early in the year when everybody on the team was hurt, right? Bartholomew and Couisnard and Williams were all out, and Gabe Reichel was forced into action. He's a walk-on, and the dude's getting minutes, and he's getting praise from Dana Altman, who said that he's one of the guys who's in the gym more than anybody else, and I love seeing that sort of stuff. But this is why, number one, I'm a fan, so I always want Oregon to do well. But number two, this is why I've remained at least cautiously optimistic about Oregon going forward, and why I'm not in blow it up and completely reset mode, because this is what they're capable of. They also put up a graphic during the broadcast. Since 2011, there's only one program in the country, and it's Kansas, that has more wins in the month of March than Oregon. Like, Dana Altman knows how to win these games. And guys are telling you very clearly, after a disappointing season, we still want to play hard. we still want to support this staff. We still want to play for each other. We've got pride of what's written across the front of our jerseys, and that's the Oregon Ducks. And they're doing that game in and game out so far in the NIT, and I hope they keep it going. I do, because I want to see these guys. It's an opportunity to develop, right? Think about the Holiday Bowl. The guy who stood out the most, at least in my mind, on either side of the ball that, may have been a forecast next year was Keith Brown. And when I get to talking about the linebackers here on the show, as spring football is underway, Keith Brown is a guy that I'm going to be hard-pressed to ignore, because I watched him in that game and I was like, man, is he the best defensive player on the field? Like, at times it felt that way. He was solid in coverage. He had a couple lapses, but he hasn't played a ton, which is why it was great experience for him. And that's the other great thing, is like, these are absolutely low-stakes learning opportunities in real game environments for guys who don't have a ton of experience. And I watched Keith Brown and thought, man, he's winning pressures against offensive linemen when he's blitzing. He's tackling in space. He's in the right spots. I mean, he's doing a lot of things really, really well. So I think that's all really encouraging, and I'm most looking forward to see what they do on Tuesday against Wisconsin. We'll close with some women's basketball thoughts, because this was piggybacking off of Bud Everett's question from yesterday. Again, always appreciate the questions. YouTube comments, Twitter, @Smalls_55 or @LockedOnDucks. Mentions, DMs, all of that wide open and accessible. But he was asking about both programs and, who might come back next year that could help the team this year. And I talked about them on the men's side. You can go listen to the full thoughts yesterday. But on the women's side, I mean, they need to hit the portal hard, right? I haven't checked on their recruiting pursuits, but regardless, they've got young players to develop in Grace Van Sluten and Chance Gray, but they need to hit the portal, because they were just out of bodies this year. I mean, they had Sedona Prince get hurt before the season. Kylie Watson transferred before the season. They had another player leave in the middle of the season. Like, they were down literally to 7 or 8 scholarship players at one point. Like, it was, and they had injuries too. Like, it was bad. So they need bodies on the one hand, but the players who could come back next year, one of whom Kelly Graves shouted out on Twitter the other day, because she's been scorching hot from downtown after really struggling at points during the season, is Tina Paopao, who has 2 years left at Oregon if she wants. And I'm assuming that the young players, Grace Van Sluten, Chance Gray, will be back for another year. They'll have a big opportunity to play again, and if they can develop, they've got a lot of potential. Both of them were highly sought after 5-star recruits. I'm pretty sure they were both top 20 in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But I think the biggest name to watch, right? Tina Paopao is one, because she's been really good for the last couple of years, and the last couple of weeks she's been outstanding. But Endia Rogers has been Oregon's best player this year, right? She's a baller. And she's got 1 year left if she wants it, because she spent 2 at USC, but one of those was the COVID year. So next year would be her 3rd at Oregon, and this is her 2nd. So that's a big, big name to watch, because if she leaves, then Chance Gray has to step up big time for the Ducks. Big, big time. But if she comes back, you've got the foundation of a really good team, but they need more depth. I think they just got tired. Philly Che was having to play more minutes than I think she was, really expected to at this point in her career. She's a really big body, but still pretty underdeveloped at the offensive end. But she improved as the year went on. But you need more bodies, specifically in the front court, to supplement Che and Van Sluten down there. So those are the names to watch for. They play tonight, the women do, being Monday against the Owls of Rice. Don't forget Josh Pate's rule number 1. Don't lose to food. Hope they don't. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.